When I started my series of Arthurian novels, the Swithen, I never intended it at the beginning to be a kind of progressive, woman-forward project, but that's a little bit how it's shaking out in the reality, and I think it's excellent. I'm definitely not trying to position myself as any kind of great feminist. I'll just explain what happened when I was writing my novels. So the deal with my series of King Arthur novels, the Swithen, is that I'm not allowed to change anything from the original legends of King Arthur. I can only add or enhance characters and their thoughts in a way that fits seamlessly into the old story without changing it. A lot of the women in the Arthurian sources are never even given names. They're just the maiden or the lady or something like that. My first book is about the birth of Merlin and is largely a story of his mother, but she's one of these women who never gets a name and is barely a developed character. So in my book, I invent a name for her and develop a big, very complex psychology for her. So now she's no longer just a symbol. She's a real person who plays a very important role. Also in the legend, she just vanishes once Merlin leaves her, because we only care about Merlin and we never see her again, but I just couldn't do that. So in my version, she stays around and is going to play a very influential role throughout the whole series. The old legends are basically a man's show, but in my series, the women were going to be developed in equal complexity so that they and their stories and concerns can stand alongside the men's and affect the story equally. Since the whole thing about my series is that I'm not allowed to alter anything about the old legends, there are things in them that I don't agree with that I can't change. The biggest example of this is in Book 3, The Void Place, in which the king, not King Arthur, takes on the appearance of a woman's husband and has sex with her, and this is where Arthur comes from. Well, to me, this is obviously a rape, and I had a lot of anxiety about how to handle telling this story in a responsible way. So I reached out to women beforehand to discuss how they'd approach the story and just make sure that my maleness wasn't obscuring any aspect that I couldn't see or making me blind to some aspects of the story. So I researched tales of sexual assault and Me Too accounts of coercion and worked it into the story where they specifically named the crime as rape. Another aspect that, again, I didn't plan, but I can see now that it's going to be a major feature of the entire series, is the education of boys to be thoughtful, respectful, and to think before resorting to violence. Book 4, which I'm writing right now, depicts Arthur's childhood, and I can see already it's going to be about how he stands apart from most of the boys around him, in that he's thoughtful and respectful of women and questions cruelty and violence. So much of the Arthurian legend centers around violence, but my version is going to have people react to it and think about it in ways we don't often see in Arthurian or really in any kind of epic fantasy fiction. We tend to think of the King Arthur stories as hopelessly outdated, but it's actually not. The old stories, as they are saturated with examinations of violence, gender, sex roles, and power relationships. I intend to amplify all that material in my series in an interesting way that hopefully both questions and interrogates its intentions and the results, so that even though these stories are 1,000 years old, they ask questions that are still very relevant to the issues we're still discussing today.